At night in the city of Kaohsiung, Taiwan, there were several gangsters who had managed to steal a lot of money. It was known that they were the feared gangsters in the city. They seemed happy and carefree because they managed to rob a lot of money. Not long after, one of their friends arrived. Strangely, the man was just silent in the corner, seeing that they were confused because their friend was silent. But the man was stabbed by someone from behind. It turned out that the man who stabbed was a hitman named Mr. Long. He was known to be very good at fighting. The gangsters who saw their friend die in front of him were instantly shocked. They prepared to fight Mr. Long. But Mr. Long was quickly able to defeat them all without any resistance that made Mr. Long injured. After Mr. Long defeated them, he took the bag that contained the money that the gangsters had stolen. He then went to a hotel to meet his boss. Mr. Long happily gave the bag of money to him. His boss was very happy to see him. He then gave Mr. Long a new mission. He told Mr. Long to kill a Yakuza named Sotaro. The boss prepared everything for Mr. Long. He also sent Mr. Long to Japan to kill Sotaro. The next night, Mr. Long was finally in Tokyo, Japan. A driver sent by Mr. Long's boss picked him up at the airport. The driver then drove Mr. Long to a club where Sotaro was. Before entering the club, Mr. Long made plans while looking at Sotaro's photo. Soon after, Mr. Long entered the club. He could easily find Sotaro in the club. Mr. Long, who was very optimistic, headed towards Sotaro. He prepared to stab Sotaro. When Mr. Long thrust the knife, he was surprised because he found that Sotaro was wearing a bulletproof vest. This made Mr. Long get caught because he was going to kill Sotaro. Then Sotaro's men immediately arrested Mr. Long even before Mr. Long could put up a fight. Then Sotaro's men took Mr. Long to a field of grass. They wanted to kill him as soon as possible, but they started beating him up first. Of course, Mr. Long couldn't fight them because his head was covered with a cloth and his hands were tied tightly. Meanwhile, a man was watching the movements of Sotaro's men near the grassland. The man looked annoyed and eager to kill Sotaro. As they focused on beating Mr. Long, the man slowly approached them. He then asked about the whereabouts of a woman, but they didn't give him any information. Mr. Long, who heard the commotion, thought that this was his chance to escape. Then Mr. Long quietly went into the field of grass. On the other hand, the man who approached Sotaro's men failed to beat them. He ended up falling into the grass like Mr. Long. Sotaro, who realized that Mr. Long was missing, immediately sent his men to chase Mr. Long and the mysterious man. Meanwhile, Sotaro watched them from afar while helping to shoot Mr. Long and the man. The good thing was that both Mr. Long and the mysterious man named Kenji managed to hide. Mr. Long saw Kenji carrying a knife and borrowed it. Then Mr. Long cut the rope that bound him. Later, Mr. Long tried to fight the Yakuza with Kenji's knife. Unfortunately, when Mr. Long fought them, Kenji was shot by one of Sotaro's men. Mr. Long was very shocked to see Kenji dead. He then wanted to escape, but sadly Mr. Long was shot in the stomach. With all his might, Mr. Long walked away from them. He found a truck parked on the road with its engine running, but the door was locked, so he decided to get into the box. Soon Sotaro's men came looking for him. They were suspicious of the truck. Luckily, the driver came and took the car away from the Sotaro men. In the morning, Mr. Long arrived at a deserted village. There were unsuccessful immigrants who eventually settled in Japan. Mr. Long chose to sleep on the side of the road. A little while later, there was a little boy. His name was Jun, who also lived in this area. Jun saw the injured Mr. Long and went back home. He took some medicine and met Mr. Long again. Then he went back and brought Mr. Long some clothes to change into. Jun even gave the vegetables that he had stolen to Mr. Long. Jun hoped that the vegetables would feed Mr. Long. Mr. Long was happy to see that. He walked around looking for tools that he could make for cooking. There was a house that was not well maintained. Mr. Long went in and found pots and spices. Then he went back to the place where he left the vegetables earlier. Mr. Long took the vegetables and decided to return to the abandoned house. He cooked in the courtyard of the house using wood and makeshift cooking utensils. He also invited Jun to enjoy his cooking. Mr. Long was surprised to hear Jun compliment his cooking in Chinese. Jun told him that her mother was Taiwanese. Just as Jun finished his meal, his mother called out to him. Jun's mother's name was Lily, who was a drug addict. Lily told Jun to go somewhere. Mr. Long followed Jun, who apparently went to a parking lot. Jun bought drugs that were put in a toy car. Mr. Long immediately understood that those were drugs. He was curious about what Jun would do with the drugs. After he followed Jun to his house, Mr. Long found out that Lily took the drugs and was about to use them. Mr. Long entered Jun's house immediately. He didn't hesitate to teach Lily a lesson. Mr. Long doused Lily with water in the bathroom. Then he tied Lily's body so that she wouldn't hurt herself because of her addiction. Jun, who didn't know anything, was angry with Mr. Long. He thought that Mr. Long was hurting his mother, but Mr. Long wanted Jun to bring food for Lily. At first, Jun refused, but after Mr. Long gave him some understanding, Jun agreed to bring food for his mother. When he got home, he wanted to serve his mother some soup. But Lily got angry and spilled the soup. Mr. Long, who was secretly looking around, felt concerned about their chaotic life. Later that evening, Mr. Long decided to stroll around the highway. He saw a cell phone in the car that was on. Mr. Long quickly picked up the cell phone. He called his boss, but it was Erica, the assistant, who answered. Mr. Long told her that he lost his passport and money, so he couldn't go back to Taiwan. Mr. Long asked about when there was a ship heading to Taiwan. Erica replied that there might be a ship to Taiwan on August 30th. She also told him that the ticket price was 300,000 yen. Mr. Long was confused because he had no money. Erica suggested that Mr. Long should rob to get the money. But Mr. Long thought, how could he rob in such a deserted place? The next morning, Mr. Long cooked in the courtyard again. One of the neighbors was quietly watching him. The old man smelled the scent of the food that Mr. Long cooked. He then approached Mr. Long and asked permission to taste the food. Mr. Long happily allowed him to taste the food. The man was amazed at how good Mr. Long's food tasted. Then he asked Mr. Long to cook at his house. Unexpectedly, Mr. Long's simple dishes tasted delicious. Even other neighbors came and tasted his cooking. They praised Mr. Long's dishes, so they asked Mr. Long to cook for them to have dinner together in the evening. During dinner, Mr. Long's neighbors initiated to help Mr. Long to open a Taiwanese noodle business. They provide capital and will build a cart for Mr. Long. One of the men offered to supply electricity to Mr. Long's home. The man felt that Mr. Long liked the same girl band as him. His neighbors also gave him some furniture to put in his home. When he got home, Mr. Long reflected on his fate, as he had to earn money to return to Taiwan. He had previously received money from his neighbors for business capital. Therefore, he hoped that he would have 30,000 yen before August 30th. The next morning, Mr. Long and Jun were daydreaming in front of the house. Jun then told him that the neighbors told him to open a Taiwanese noodle business yesterday. Not long after, the neighbors came to see Mr. Long. They worked together to clean and tidy up his house. One of the neighbors brought some ingredients for Mr. Long to start his business tomorrow. Then Mr. Long used the ingredients to cook Taiwanese noodles. The neighbors also built a new cart for him. When they were about to leave, the neighbors suggested that he should sell in front of the temple. Mr. Long was confused because he couldn't understand Japanese. In the evening, Mr. Long made porridge for Lily. After a few days, Lily got better. Meanwhile, Mr. Long reflected and looked at the calendar. He counted the days to August 30th. In the morning, Mr. Long started selling in front of the temple, as suggested by his neighbors. The first day, Mr. Long, accompanied by Jun, had sold a lot of Taiwanese noodles. The customers were satisfied with the taste of Mr. Long's delicious food. In addition to Jun, neighbors were also present to cheer for Mr. Long, who was selling on the first day. Even the man who thought Mr. Long was a fan of the girl band perfume and invited other fans to cheer him on. Until the afternoon, Mr. Long went home because his Taiwanese noodles were sold out. Then Mr. Long, who felt sorry for Jun, decided to buy him ice cream as a reward for helping him to sell. When night came, Jun, who was tired, slept peacefully. Meanwhile, Lily was still eating porridge. She looked at Jun and felt proud of him. Lily remembered her past, as it turned out that Lily was a prostitute in a bar. She then met her partner, Kenji, who was a mysterious man who met Mr. Long on the grass. Lily and Kenji fall in love with each other over time. Until one day, Lily told Kenji that she was pregnant. However, one of Sotaro's men found out that Lily was pregnant. Sotaro was very angry because if Lily was pregnant, then she could not be a prostitute. Then Sotaro scolded Kenji and beat him brutally. He then asked Lily to have an abortion. But when Sotaro's men were caught off guard, Lily ran away from the abortion place. She managed to survive until she gave birth to a boy named Jun. Lily continued her life by becoming a prostitute again. The difference was that she served men in her house. One day she met a yakuza named Kentaro. Since Kentaro became Lily's regular customer, he introduced drugs to Lily. This made Lily become a drug addict. Then one day Kentaro no longer came to Lily. Lily felt confused because she couldn't get drugs from that guy. Finally, Lily used her money to buy drugs. Meanwhile, she was being charged to pay for her apartment. When she arrived in front of her apartment, she was surprised to see Jun and their belongings in front of the apartment. Lily was eventually kicked out of the place. She continued her life in her current place near Mr. Long. Mr. Long counted his money once again after he sold his food. Seeing the money little by little made Mr. Long confident that he could collect the money to return to Taiwan. He then made the ingredients for tomorrow's sale. The next day, Mr. Long went out to sell. One of his neighbors wanted to make Mr. Long more famous by filming his food, but Mr. Long didn't really like that. On the second day, Mr. Long's Taiwanese noodles sold even better. Then when he went home, he marked the calendar again. He was even more eager to collect money. While sleeping, Mr. Long dreamed about Sotaro coming to see Mr. Long while selling. Then in the dream, Sotaro shot Mr. Long's neighbors, and also Mr. Long himself. Suddenly, Mr. Long woke up and felt uneasy. In the morning, Mr. Long went out to sell, but this time he was very vigilant, remembering that he had a bad dream last night. The next day, Mr. Long, Jun, and Lily went to Wonderland. They got the tickets from the neighbors who won in the art performance last night. The three of them enjoyed the vacation. Moreover, Mr. Long saw that Jun was happy, which made Mr. Long even happier. He decided to accompany Jun on the vacation even though it was August 30th. This meant that Mr. Long was supposed to return to Taiwan. But he realized that he didn't have enough money to buy a ticket. He chose to make peace with the situation and go on vacation with Jun and Lily. In Wonderland, they really enjoyed themselves. They even made cups together, had dinner with each other, played ping pong, and stayed at a hotel. Their togetherness made them feel closer, like a harmonious family. When they got home, Mr. Long gave gifts to his neighbors. This made their neighbors happy. Mr. Long thought of making a delicious meal to accompany their conversation. In the evening, Mr. Long took Lily home, but it seemed Lily was starting to like Mr. Long. Lily thought about accompanying Mr. Long and Jun to sell tomorrow. In the morning, Mr. Long prepared for selling, but there was something different about that day because Lily wanted to join Jun and Mr. Long in selling. After the sale, they wanted to go straight home, but on the way, they passed kids playing baseball. Jun saw his peers playing, and he also wanted to join them. Mr. Long seemed to know Jun's heart. He then enrolled Jun in the club. Jun was very happy to hear that. Days passed and Jun got the chance to participate in a baseball competition. Mr. Long and Lily attended the game. It was not only the two of them, but the neighbors also came and cheered for Jun with a sense of excitement. Jun's team won. On the next day, Mr. Long went to sell his food as usual. Then Mr. Long, Lily, and Jun walked together to the temple. Lily, who felt closer to Mr. Long, dared to do something fun by sitting on the cart. With Jun on the way, Lily saw Kentaro from a distance. Kentaro was also watching the three of them from the cross side. Lily, who saw that, panicked instantly. She chose to go home first. She said that she had left some things at her house. Mr. Long was actually aware that Lily was acting strangely, but he dismissed his thoughts and let Lily go home. When Lily arrived at her house, she was surprised to see Kentaro there. Kentaro frightened Lily by teasing her and breaking the glass that Lily made with Mr. Long, and Jun. Kentaro also said that Mr. Long was Satoru's fugitive, and then Kentaro forced Lily to give him service. He also injected drugs into Lily's body. After that incident, Lily felt very sad and frustrated with her life. She felt that her life was far from peaceful. Meanwhile, At the temple, Mr. Long got a new customer who turned out to be Kintaro. He ordered a portion of food from Mr. Long. Looking at the man, Mr. Long felt something unusual. After the Taiwanese noodles were sold out, Mr. Long rushed home. When he arrived at his neighborhood, Jun looked for his mother. He was shocked to see that his mother had died by hanging herself. Seeing that, Mr. Long diverted Jun's eyes from seeing his mother's body. Shortly after that, Mr. Long heard a noise in front of the house. It turned out that Mr. Long's cart was destroyed by Kintaro and his men. Then Mr. Long's neighbors approached Kintaro's men, but the neighbors were beaten by Kintaro. Mr. Long was very upset. He was forced to show his identity as a hitman in front of Jun and his neighbors. Mr. Long was furious and beat all of Kintaro's men mercilessly. Soon after, Sotaro's men arrived, along with Sotaro. Mr. Long brutally finished them off by using the knife that Kenji gave him. Mr. Long easily defeated Sotaro's men. In the end, Mr. Long's mission to kill Sotaro was completed, but his neighbors were shocked when they found out his true identity as a hitman. In the evening, the neighbors gathered to take care of Lily's dead body. After that, they decided to expel Mr. Long from the village. They were forced to evict him because they didn't want to get into more trouble. Mr. Long finally decided to return to Taiwan after earning enough money. When he arrived in Taiwan, Mr. Long met his boss at a restaurant. Mr. Long wanted to report that his mission to kill Sotaro had been completed. Hearing that, his boss gave him a new mission to kill a target. As Mr. Long was about to leave the restaurant, he saw his neighbors across the street. They came all the way from Japan to find Mr. Long in Taiwan. They were escorting Jun, who was living alone and wanted to meet Mr. Long. Seeing this, Mr. Long immediately came out of the restaurant and greeted his neighbors. Mr. Long then hugged Jun, who approached him in the middle of the street. Mr. Long was touched by the kindness of his neighbors. This made Mr. Long feel mellow. He decided to adopt Jun as his son. The two of them eventually lived together in an apartment in Taiwan. Mr. Long also registered Jun in an elementary school in Taiwan so that he could have a bright future.